Hello, this is Congressman Brad Sherman, live from Washington, D.C., where we're about to start another one of our San Fernando Valley Town Hall meetings. First, a little logistics. Please write down the following number: 855-920-0548. Once again, that's 855-920-0548. If for any reason we get disconnected, you'll just want to dial in on that number, and you'll be back with us. Now, this is one of a series of telephone town halls that we've done, and many of you have been on before, but we have the same procedures. If you want to ask a question, whether it's a personal question or whether it's one that you want to present to the entire San Fernando Valley, you dial *3. Now, if you just want to talk to my staff, maybe deal with some issue involving a federal agency, you can do that. But most people who dial *3 will want to be put in the queue and be one of the many people who will ask a question tonight that will be heard by thousands of San Fernando Valley residents. Now, we're going to have two special guests. At the state level, we'll have State Senator Bob Hertzberg, and at the city level, City Councilwoman Nithya Raman, and we'll hear from them in either 20 or 40 minutes, as the case may be. Now, if you want to know about our future town halls, you go to bradsherman.house.gov. You'll be able to see when our next town hall will be. It will be there in the week before Thanksgiving, so that'll be after the election. Give us a chance to talk about how the new, how Congress will shape up in 2023. And the exact date hasn't been set, but you can find out about it by going to bradsherman.house.gov. And you'll also be able to submit a question. We will have a number of pre-submitted written questions that I'll deal with tonight, although mostly I'll be dealing with questions live from the floor. Now, we're going to be going right up until 8:10 p.m. If I go beyond that, our vendor will charge us a lot more money. So we will wrap it up by 8:10. And God knows it's hot in the San Fernando Valley. I want to get the word out about the cooling centers because we're at temperatures where people's health could really be adversely affected. We have the Canoga Park Senior Citizen Center there on Jordan Avenue in Canoga Park. It's open from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Leased pets are welcome. And then, of course, every LA City Public Library is open in business hours, not only for those who are interested in the books, but those who are interested in the air conditioning. Please try to get the word out because we want everybody to be safe, even those without access to good home air conditioning systems. Now, I want to put in a pitch for our constituent service team. We've got Lisa Montano on the line. She's our senior caseworker with well over a decade of experience. So imagine a federal agency makes a mistake. It could happen. It could affect you. Could be someone trying to visit you from abroad that can't get a visa from one of our embassies. Could be Social Security. Could be the IRS. You call our team at 818-501-9200 and talk to Lisa Montano. She'll work very hard. She'll solve your problem, we hope, and then I, Brad Sherman, will take the credit. It's an excellent system. Our office is on Van Nuys Boulevard, located in America's best named city, Sherman Oaks. They're at 5000 Van Nuys Boulevard. Once again, that number is 818-501-9200. And I do want to point out that one issue that the State Department is just way behind in renewing passports or granting passports. If you don't have a passport, apply for one now. You never know when you might need it. If you have a passport that's going to expire in the next year, get it renewed now. Don't wait until you win the lottery and that free trip to the Netherlands, because it will take many, many weeks to renew your passport, even if you pay the extra fee. Now, if God forbid you have an unexpected situation, all of a sudden your passport needs to be renewed very quickly, you can give us a call. But Lisa and our team are working pretty hard now, and it's much better if people in the Valley get their passports renewed way before they expire. Now, I realize that some people have joined us in the last 3 or 4 minutes. So once again, this is Congressman Brad Sherman. This is our San Fernando Valley Town Hall meeting. We'll be on till 8:10 p.m., and this is a chance to discuss all the issues facing Congress today. Now, if you live in the 30th Congressional District, you should feel free to dial *3 and get in the queue and ask a question. If you don't live in the district, relax and enjoy, but the questioning should be done by people who live in our district. Now, I do want to summarize the most important thing that Congress has done since our last town hall, and that was pass the Inflation Reduction Act, which has been signed into law. And I would refer to it as the Inflation and Carbon Reduction Act, because not only will this bill help us fight inflation, but it is the biggest thing done by anyone on Earth to stop climate change. And it will result in a reduction of total output of carbon and other greenhouse gases that exceeds what any country has done to date. Now, I want to summarize this bill. Perhaps most important from an economic perspective is over the next decade, it will reduce the U.S. deficit by $300 billion. Now, all of the official projections only deal with the next 10 years, but the Nonpartisan Committee for Responsible Federal Budget has estimated that over the 20-year period, we're talking about a $2 trillion reduction in the federal deficit. The bill will provide $260 billion in clean energy credits and incentives for solar and wind and hydropower electricity to be created, for people to be incentivized to get electric automobiles, for factories to completely retool in a way that reduces their greenhouse gases. The bill will also extend for another 3 years the credits that are helping people afford the Affordable Care Act. This will prevent 3 million people from becoming uninsured. There is a cap on the annual prescription spending for seniors who are covered by Medicare at $2,000. So no matter what the situation, that's the most a senior in Medicare can pay for out-of-pocket pharmaceutical costs. And that will be a boon to not only to every senior who takes advantage of it because they happen to get this or that condition where they need expensive drugs, but also to all 64 million Medicare enrollees who know that even if it doesn't happen to them, if it did, they would not be losing their home, losing their life savings because of the cost of pharmaceuticals. The bill provides for a 15% minimum tax for corporations. And this is so important because, and I'm a CPA, what big companies want to do is tell the shareholders they're making a fortune, and then tell the tax man they didn't make any money at all. The overriding desire of corporate executives is to tell the shareholders they're making a lot. That drives the stock price up. That drives executive bonuses up. And so what this does is it harnesses the desire of corporations to report good results to shareholders and say, if whatever you're reporting to shareholders, you got to pay a 15% tax on it. And that will generate hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years. The bill also, and this has been criticized by some, but I agree with it, will provide a lot of additional funding to the IRS. The average wage earner taxes, there's almost no need for an audit. You get a paycheck, maybe you get some interest from your bank, maybe you have a home mortgage. The IRS gets all that money, all that information electronically, and matches it up. And that's not where problems occur and where underreporting occurs. Where it occurs is at the very top, where things are complicated and where transactions don't get reported, where there are fancy and unreportable income-producing events. And what this bill does is it takes the total number of people working from the IRS per American back to where it was under Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan believed that we should have about one IRS employee for every 3,000 Americans, and that's where this bill will take us. So while it's criticized as somehow the IRS is going to be going crazy, we're going back to the Ronald Reagan standard. The bill provides for negotiation of drug prices for 50 drugs covered by Medicare Part D. These negotiations will, I think, not only establish what Medicare pays for the drugs, but for those under age 65, it'll establish the standard and will assure that we get closer to paying a price for drugs in the United States that's similar to what is paid in the other developed countries in the world. It also imposes penalties on drug manufacturers that increase prices faster than the rate of inflation. Once you come up with a drug, there's no reason to raise the price. You've done all of the research to produce that drug and to establish its efficacy, and at that point, you should just be increasing the price for inflation, no more than that. It limits the cost of the out-of-pocket cost for insulin to $35 a month. When it comes to the energy and climate provisions, it's a program that will cut America's carbon and other greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by the year 2030 through investments in hydrogen production, advanced manufacturing, electrical vehicles, advanced industrial program, etc. And the bill also does provide for faster environmental reviews of proposed projects. And, some projects are good and necessary and some are not, but decisions ought to be made within 2 years. The effect on the budget deficit, and I think just about everybody agrees that if you reduce the federal budget deficit, you reduce inflation over the long term. This reduces our deficit by $305 billion. Little comment, though. The bill only provides subsidies for those on Obamacare, the subsidy extension provision, only until 2025. If in some future bill we made that permanent, then the savings of the package, that bill and this bill together, would be only $155 billion, rather than the $305 that is established under the bill as we adopted it. So with that, I think I've described the most important action taken since our last telephone town hall, and it's time to take a question from the floor. Don, who do we have in line?
We have Robin from Chatsworth, who has a question about January 6 hearings. Robin, you should be on now.
Yes. When are the hearings broadcast to the public going to resume? We were told it was September. Any idea when?
Well, Congress reconvenes next week. I haven't looked at the committee schedule, but I assume that next week or very soon thereafter, we'll be seeing these hearings on television. I think there's going to be an effort to issue a report in October, and there's a lot for us to learn and reflect on. I was here on January 6th, and it was a scary time, not just for those of us here, but for the entire country. Let's move on to the next question.
Sorry, Congressman. We have Kyle from Sherman Oaks. Kyle, you are on now.
Hello, Kyle.
Hello. Hi, Congressman Sherman. Thank you for taking my question. My question is what are you doing to protect our Second Amendment rights? All I hear from your colleagues and people in Washington and people in a lot of people in the California state government as well, that they're trying to attack our Second Amendment rights. What are you doing to protect our Second Amendment rights?
Well, the Second Amendment is not absolute. The Supreme Court defines exactly what those rights are, and the rights as defined by the Supreme Court are absolutely safe and enforced by a Supreme Court that has struck down gun control, most recently in New York, that they felt to overrid those rights. At the same time, I'd like to see some constraints on guns. I get a very low rating. I get an F rating from the NRA, and part of that is I'd like to see the background checks be universal. Right now, if you go to a gun store, they do a background check. You go to a gun show, you can buy a gun without a background check. And the effect of that is, well, if you're not going to pass a background check, you go to a gun show. I think that we do face a real problem with gun violence in our country. And we recently took some action in Congress that I thought was far too little, but at least we have cleaned up the gun show loophole with regard to those between the ages of 18 and 21. And that was in reaction to a mass shooting carried out by somebody under the age of 21. But the fact is, everyone who buys a gun should go through the background check process. In addition, again, you talk about Second Amendment rights. The Second Amendment, I do not think, requires you to have a magazine with more than 10 bullets. If you can't take down a deer with 10 shots, get out of the forest. And in mass shootings, I remember when my friend Gabby Giffords was shot in Arizona, the gunman was stopped when he had to reload. And when you start putting 40 and 60 bullets in a magazine, I think that goes too far. So again, I think the Second Amendment rights are what the Supreme Court determines them to be. If Congress were to take any action beyond that, or a state were to take any action beyond that, the Supreme Court is there. But we've got a long way to go before our gun laws in this country are sensible. Well, let's take one more question, and then we'll introduce our first special guest.
Okay, Congressman, we have Stephanie with a question about climate change. Stephanie, you are on now.
Hi there. Good evening. Thank you for holding this town hall. I would, and I also appreciate your support to pass the Inflation Reduction Act. I am an early childhood educator from San Fernando Valley commuting to Culver City, and as a person who's seen a lot of these wildfires, and especially that we had this past week and on the 5 freeway, I was hoping to find out more about what are the next steps you would like to see Congress for dealing with climate change.
Well, I'm a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, which goes further than the bills we've been able to pass and sets much more ambitious goals. You talk about commuting to Culver City from the Valley. The one thing, while we're thinking globally, we need to act locally. We need rail through the Sepulveda Pass. I'm sure, especially if you drive during rush hour, you're sitting there at 4 miles an hour behind, with every tailpipe churning out smog and carbon. And I think that if we can provide rail through the Sepulveda Pass, and as we've shown on our website, there are different proposals. Some call for a subway Some call for a monorail on the 405. I think it's important that we get something built and built within the next decade. And even if for some reason you can't write it, whoever would be in front of you on the 405 on your way to Culver City, hopefully it will be on the rail. It'll connect up to the what are called the purple and turquoise lines, although they're taking away the colors and they're going to letters, whatever, so that people who do go through the Sepulveda Pass will then be able to connect and go to Century City or Beverly Hills or take the train to Santa Monica. So I think it'll be a very useful addition. Los Angeles is the most important city and the biggest city in the world that doesn't really have a rail system, and we've been building it all too slowly. With that, we're going to go on to one more question, and then we're going to do a survey question.
Okay, Congressman, we have... yes, sir. You want to take one more question from the...
We want to take one more question, yes. We're waiting for the Senate.
Okay. We have... Wesley from Encino. Wesley, you are on right now.
Hello, all. Thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this. I really appreciate the direct democracy we're having here. My question is, when will we see, obviously on a state level, but also county, city, and down to the bottom, enforcement about water regulations here? Because we drive up and down the valley, I see some people have sacrificed, their lawns are gone, and they didn't need them anyway. But you look at county properties, city properties, the south of the boulevard up in Granada, Calabasas. Obviously, these folks can afford to keep watering their lawn and pay the fine, but when will there actually be enforcement to directly affect our drought that's going on here? And then secondly, can we see on a state level, or will we ever, an incentivization to get private homeowners and everyone to convert their lawns to more drought tolerant, to native plants? Mm-hmm. LA, again, best city in the world. Why are we falling behind Vegas, Phoenix, all over the Southwest?
Well,
anyway, thanks again.
Again, you may see people who are watering their lawns. Maybe they're doing it in conformity with the regulations. Maybe they're violating. You'd have to look at whether they're odd or even and what day of the week it is. Not everybody with a green lawn is violating the rules. I do think that we need to, and we passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We've got money in there that can particularly recycle so much of our water that is going to waste now that could be used a second time. The thing to focus on about water is that in all the cities and all the suburbs, we use well under 15% of the state's water. Well over 40% is going to agriculture, and roughly 40%, a little, is being allowed to go to the ocean. That is good for those fish, particularly salmon that come up the river. But while we live in a city, and that's what we see, and you think, oh, we've got a drought, the big problem is that guy's lawn, that is the tiniest part of this. We need agriculture that is more efficient, and farmers are paying way, way less for water than people who live in cities, and so there's much less incentive for them to conserve. So I think that if we had some sort of pricing system where farmers would use less and be incentivized to use less, that we might be there. Now, in fact, the water regulations in Phoenix and Vegas are traditionally more severe than Los Angeles. Those cities are very much built in a desert. We're built kind of on the fringes of a desert. But there's a lot that can be done to conserve water, to reuse water. And as to enforcement of the rules, we do have rules. They should be enforced, and I think it may take a little while, but I think that the DMV will be enforcing those rules. We've only had them for a short amount of time, and of course there is some basic enforcement in that the more water you use, and this is not new, the more water you use, the more you pay. So there's already a strong incentive and then of course we've had programs where we actually pay people to rip out their lawns and put in something that doesn't need to be irrigated. So I think that we live in a dry part of the country that is getting drier. We're dealing with climate change, and we've got to look at all three elements: city usage and possibly reusage, agriculture, and how much water we allow to flow to the ocean. With that, we do have our first guest speaker, and I've had guest speakers join us simply because so many people who call in are concerned with issues involving state and local government. We couldn't have anybody better to talk about state government than Senate Majority Leader Emeritus Robert Hertzberg.
Thanks.
And I was going to tell people great things about you, Bob, before I introduced you.
I'll listen.
He was unanimously elected Speaker of the State Assembly by both Democrats and Republicans back in the day. The Los Angeles Daily News has said he's has relentless dedication and indefatigable energy and a reputation for integrity and perseverance. So now here he is to tell us what's happening in Sacramento, Senator Robert Hertzberg.
Thank you, Congressman. I really appreciate it. And thanks for including me, and thanks for the important partnership that we have in serving the folks of the San Fernando Valley together for so many years. And I got to tell you, it's so many of the successes that we're having at the state, which have been many, as a result of the policies that Congressman Sherman's been fighting for. And I'm not just saying that to say that, it's just the truth. The reality is so much money we've had over the last few years during the pandemic for PPP, for so many of the subsidies to be able to help businesses and the community folks and to pay for vaccines and the like came from the federal government. So much of the money, $5.4 billion from the federal government, authorized and led by Sherman for all these eviction defenses and making sure people's rent's covered. So as we become the deliverers of these things, I always have great respect for and appreciation for the people who are part of this, and I never think it's ethical or right to sit and take credit when they, in fact, did it. So I just want to make that clear, and I really appreciate that, Congressman. And the same thing now with the inflation, with the act that was just passed some weeks ago in Congress, again, providing an extraordinary benefit to us in California in terms of allocation of resources, reducing drug prices for prescriptions, insulin, all sorts of things, increasing the subsidies for covering California on the healthcare piece. But I want to talk about a couple of the things that I think were successful in this year that tie into what, particularly the Congressman was just talking about in water and some of the other issues. I always like to start with budget, because when you've got more money, it's easier to solve more problems. And when you have less money, it creates very significant issues, and there's furloughs and layoffs and all sorts of problems and cuts in services and the like that we want to do in government. We've had the last 2 years just an extraordinary amount of money for two reasons. One, there's been a lot of these initial public offerings that have produced an unbelievable amount of capital gains that has helped, and plus literally hundreds of billions of dollars from the federal government. We didn't do it on our own. It was the federal government that brought so much of this money that allowed us to then redistribute it in ways that were consistent with their mandate. I'm concerned, quite frankly, with the next coming years. Congressman Sherman's a CPA. He cares, and he was the former member of Board of Equalization. He knows a lot about tax, and I hate that subject with Board of itself. But if you don't think about tax and taxes and how the money, where the money goes, and how to get the money, all the other things we want to do doesn't work. And so I suspect in the next come years in California, we're going to be facing some significant challenges. And the money that's coming in from the federal government through all the various programs that have been developed are going to be significantly helpful to us avoiding some of the consequences of those downturns. On water, the Congressman was just talking about, I want to add a couple of thoughts to it. There's 3 million gallons a day, not a week, not a month, a year, 3 million gallons a day that we clean up to federal standards. And we have a pipe that goes 3 miles out into the ocean, and we put the water in the ocean. But, you know, as they say in Yiddish, a Lochenkopf, you got to have a hole in your head. It's nuts. Here we are having drought and problems, and we're throwing water in the ocean. 1 year, just for the fun of it, I introduced a bill that said I made it illegal to put water in the ocean because I wanted to make the point. And so with the money the federal government's now giving us for recycled water, the idea is to take that water, instead of putting it in the ocean, to recharge the groundwater. That basically there's spreading fields where you can put it in the ground, it sinks back in, it percolates through the earth and cleans it up even more. And then you basically, hypothetically, stick a straw in the ground and pump it back out. And so as we have a water system that takes water from the Colorado River or from Northern California, we can be much more sustainable in that regard. That's number one, and I think you're going to see a lot of that activity, and particularly the money the federal government gave us. 2, a couple of years ago, Jerry Brown wanted to introduce, and Laura Friedman, Assemblywoman representing Burbank-Glendale area, and I authored a series of bills dealing with, you know, conservation as a way of life, trying to figure out how we can conserve in a more elegant way. The Congressman said is correct. Of all the water that falls on the earth in California, 50% of it goes to the environment. The other 50% goes to agriculture, industry, and residential use. 80% of that 50% goes to agriculture, and he talked about the idea of what's happening there and the challenges we face, which we have to focus on. But we still need to conserve. And so we passed a law that not based upon individual homes, but based upon water districts that set a standard. And part of that law that we did 2 years ago said, let's have the State Water Board take a look.
Well, Bob, if I could interrupt, if you could wrap it up in the next 2 minutes, that would be good.
I will. I'm happy to. And so I just passed another conservation effort there. Secondly, that's really important is housing. We've had a really significant breakthrough for affordable housing in Sacramento. So I think you're going to see a lot of those log jams that we had that were slow in building affordable housing are now going to offer an opportunity to build housing. And lastly, I wanted to share on climate change and extreme heat and the like. We've put in billions and billions of dollars to begin that shift consistent with the money that's coming from the federal government to deal with the climate change issues. So I think there's some pretty good things. I was able to bring back tens of millions of dollars to the San Fernando Valley for all sorts of projects, from the Jewish the Jewish Family Services to Hope of the Valley for homeless people and the like. And together with Henry Stern, Ben Allen, and myself, we probably brought back well over $100 million for the San Fernando Valley to help support so many community efforts. So it's all been a good partnership, and I'm optimistic as I leave government in the state level, and deeply appreciative of the partnership with Congressman Sherman. And thank you for allowing me so much time.
Thanks, Robert Hertzberg. Bob, thank you. At this point, we're going to do a survey question. And Bob, also, not only thank you for coming on, thank you for what you've been doing fighting for the Valley for the last umpteen years. We're going to do a survey question. Not everybody gets to ask a question from the floor, but everybody gets to express their opinion. Our first question, question A, is one we've asked in a lot of our town halls. We get different answers, so we want to find out this time. Do you approve of President Biden's performance as president so far? Press 1 if you approve of Biden's performance. Press 2 if you disapprove. Press 3 on your phone if you're unsure, somewhere there in the middle. In addition, I told people that they could RSVP for this event and submit a question in advance. We can't do all the questions that have been submitted in advance, but we can do the one from Charles Dorsey of Burbank, who asks, give us an update on the progress of the Tax Filing Simplification Act of 2022. I ought to explain what the act does. This is a project of Senator Warren from Massachusetts and myself, and it would really revolutionize what income tax filing is for the vast majority of Americans. What would happen is the IRS would send you a first draft of your tax return. They already know what you make. They know how much was withheld. They know how much interest you paid on your mortgage, and they already know what interest you got on your bank account. So you get that, and if that's all the information that's needed and it's accurate, you push submit, you've done your taxes for the year. If for some reason you say, hey, wait a minute, that number is off, you just erase it, put in the right number. Or if you see that, yes, the IRS knew everything, but they didn't know how much I donated to Hope of the Valley, well, you add that to the return and push submit, and you're done. Now, what if you don't trust the IRS? They send you the draft. You hit erase on your computer and do it the old-fashioned way. The folks at TurboTax have a big lobby. They are fighting this. They have promised several years ago a free system, but they've been they've been fined substantially by the Federal Trade Commission by hiding the free system and only letting people know about the paid system. But their system is a computer program where you have to fill in everything. And that also offers you a chance to make a mistake, even if you can find your W-2 form and it didn't get lost, and you go to put in the numbers and you reverse a couple, now you've got an erroneous return. Whereas if the IRS, they don't have to input these numbers. They get it all electronically. There's no humans involved. They can't reverse the numbers. And if they do, you'll catch it. But this is a much better system where the IRS has the information and shows you what they've got. I would say we're not going to be able to pass the bill this Congress. We do not have any we have very little Republican support. I've got 50 of my colleagues in the House, and Senator Warren has 22 of her colleagues in the Senate who have co-sponsored this bill. And it's also being opposed by a philosophy that you once heard from Ronald Reagan, who has a lot to say about taxes, who said taxes ought to hurt, that in the effort to limit government, that if we just make the process of conforming with taxes more difficult, that people were sour on the entire experience. And I simply don't agree with that. My life and your life have enough hassles already, and if our tax returns can be done more easily and more cheaply, and TurboTax doesn't get a fee, that's so much the better. Now have the results from our first survey. Approval of Biden, 73%, disapprove 18%, unsure 9%. Let's take a question from the floor, and then we'll hear from our next guest speaker.
All right, Congressman, we have a question from Barry from Woodland Hills regarding the other IRA, the retirement IRA. Barry, you're on.
Hello, Congressman. Sherman, thank you for taking my call. My question is Congress considering a moratorium on the required minimum distribution for senior citizens this year, as was done in 2020? The reason being for this question is that the amount of RMD that is required is based on an inflated portfolio ending on December 31st of 2021. However, the market has fallen a great deal, as much as 25%, and many of those portfolios of senior citizens are grossly deflated now, but the amount required to come out of those portfolios is still based on the inflated amount of 2021, giving us a year reprieve on that required minimum distribution would allow us to recover these greatly deflated portfolios. And by taking the RMD based on last year's return would be accelerating the depletion of these IRA
Let me comment on this, and let me translate it for those who are either too young or too poor to have enough money in an IRA for this to be a big concern. The whole idea of the IRA is, and the 401k, is you put money away for your retirement, and then in your retirement years, since you didn't pay taxes when you put the money in, you'd pay taxes on the money coming out. It's not supposed to be a system where you permanently defer taxes on the income. You're just deferring it to your retirement years, and the assumption is that you're in some sort of retirement at age 70 and a half, or before if you choose to do it before. There are people who are doing well and have money in their 401k or their IRA and don't need it right now and would prefer to leave it there. And particularly, they don't want to have their IRA or 401k sell stock at today's prices. The first thing I'd say is there is no assurance that tomorrow's stock market will be bigger than today's stock market. We've all seen the stock market go down. That doesn't assure that it's going back up. And the second thing is that people ought to have a portion, especially once they reach the retirement years, a portion of their IRA in liquid funds and no-risk funds. If the object of the IRA or 401k is to make sure that people can retire in dignity, and that is its purpose, to risk all your money in the stock market when you're fully retired is not what most, everybody's free to make their own decisions, but it's certainly not exactly in line with the purpose of the program. I do think that we will look at some amelioration of the rule that for this year that says that you have to distribute so much of your IRA or your 401k and be taxed on it by the end of 2022. I don't think it'll be a complete suspension, and frankly, I don't know, but I think that the 401k or an IRA is a system where people who can afford to save are given a break on their taxes, but it's not supposed to be a permanent break. It's supposed to be realized once you reach, I believe it's 55 or 57 and a half, you can start, and certainly by 70 and a half, you should be taking money out. But we have had an extraordinary disruption of our economy. I can't imagine that we're going to change the rules every time we have a year where the stock market goes down, but COVID is still affecting our economy. And now we're going to call on our next guest speaker, and that is our councilwoman for much of the South San Fernando Valley, Nithya Raman. She earned her bachelor's degree in political theory from Harvard University and then got a master's in urban planning from MIT. So she's got the best education the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts can provide. She has been redistricted, so much more of her district is in the San Fernando Valley, including Sherman Oaks and Encino and parts of Studio City. And she has been a real partner of mine in looking at things to fight for to get funded out of the federal government. The House of Representatives, I've now got it pretty well wired here, will pass a number of things. I can't guarantee that the Senate will go along, but at least the House will provide the three things in Nithya's district that she and I have worked on. $3 million for the Studio City Recreation Center to construct a new gym and a community center, some $750,000 to improve surface seat transportation in the Sherman Oaks Encino area, and $4 million to improve parks and ball fields around the South and West San Fernando Valley. So a lot of people I know who call in or are part of our telephone town halls are concerned with city issues. Nithya, why don't you take 3 minutes and summarize everything that's going on in the city?
Great. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Congressman Sherman, for having me. I'm really, really delighted to be here. As you said, my name is Nithya Raman. I am the LA City Council member representing Council District 4, which has 260,000 constituents, and the district now stretches from Silver Lake, Los Feliz, and Griffith Park through the Hollywood Hills to Studio City, Sherman Oaks, Encino, and a big chunk of Reseda. And so all of the portions of my district that are in the San Fernando Valley are represented by you, Congressmember Sherman. So I'm really excited to be here and grateful to be here and to be able to give everyone who's listening some updates about things that are happening in Council District 4 and in the city of Los Angeles overall. First and foremost, I just wanted to reiterate details about this heat wave and resources that we have available. Everyone from our elderly, those with disabilities, those without air conditioning, and those without homes have been suffering, especially in the San Fernando Valley heat. In the Valley, we have LA libraries that are open as cooling centers during regular business hours, and LA City pools like the one at Van Nuys Sherman Oaks Rec Center, which are open during regular business hours. The largest cooling centers in the Valley in my district, which are open from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. until Friday through the end of the heat wave, are the Mid-Valley Senior Citizen Center on Kester Ave in Panorama City, and the Canoga Park Senior Citizen Center on Jordan Ave in Canoga Park. So please stay cool and safe, and if you need these resources, you should definitely avail yourselves of them. I wanted to take a few moments also to talk about our office's work on homelessness, which I know is one of the most important challenges facing Los Angeles right now, and one that is really top of mind for so many of our constituents. Our office has really worked to end homelessness encampment by encampment in the district. And we have successfully reduced the size and number of encampments throughout the entire district by doing exactly what we know works. We do outreach to people who are experiencing homelessness, and we work with our staff and our team of contracted caseworkers to move people into housing. These efforts to house people at encampments rather than moving people from one sidewalk to another, which is what we've done in Los Angeles for many, many years, our method is really different in Council District 4. It results in real, sustainable change on the ground. In total, in the district, in the little over a year and a half since I've been in office, about 250 people have gone indoors from encampments into interim shelter, and about 150 of those have moved from their interim placements into permanent housing, which is really exciting, including at 4 of our district's major encampments in the Valley that were there when I took over, including at Van Nuys in 101, under the Coldwater in 101 underpass, and at Ventura and Fruitland in Studio City. This is a timely moment to be talking about homelessness because we're also going to get a progress report on the entire city's response on homelessness when we see the numbers from the 2022 annual homeless count. So that's going to report on the population of people who are homeless in the city from a count that was done in February of 2022. And it's particularly interesting because we missed last year's count due to COVID. So we're eagerly awaiting the results and hopefully seeing some of our progress reflected in those numbers.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Nithya, look forward to working with you in the years to come. Thanks for joining our town hall. And now we have another survey question. And this is question B. And Nithya, I look forward to getting back together with you and seeing some other projects we can try to seek federal funding for affecting the South and West San Fernando Valley.
Fantastic.
And so question B, do you support making the Roe v. Wade standard in federal law by adopting the Women's Health Protection Act? If you support it, press 1. If you don't support codifying and making Roe v. Wade a statute, press 2. And if you're unsure, press 3. With that, I'd like to remind people, if you'd like to ask a question, dial *3. Once again, that's *3. Do we have another question from the floor, or should we do one of the written questions?
Either way, Congressman, whatever you
Let's
prefer.
take one from the floor.
Okay, we have Ian from Sherman Oaks. Ian, you are now live.
Hey there.
There, Ian?
Yes, I'm
Hello.
here. Sorry about that. Hi. Hey, so my question, I'm sorry, it's not going to be the best worded question, but my question, Congressman, is has there been any talk on the Hill about kind of codifying any laws? You know, we for a couple of centuries have depended upon the moral obligation and tradition for the president to behave in a certain manner, and we have the norms and traditions of the office. And after 2016 with Donald Trump, there were a lot of things that we had all kind of taken for granted that this is what the president is just going to do. That he kind of bucked those traditions. And has there been any talk of, making any of those kind of norms and practices law? For example,
it would be hard, to just say all presidents shall be reasonable and shall follow the accepted customs and traditions of the country. We have passed through the House, I don't know if we can get it through the Senate, a bill prohibiting this idea that Trump had at the end of his term to create what he called Schedule F, but basically it was a system to just fire civil servants unless they were part of his MAGA group. Many of these traditions are parts of law. We have the Federal Records Act that requires the executive branch files to remain with the executive branch. We do need to codify and be well before 2024 the process that was going on January 6th. That law was written in the 1870s, I believe. And when we instead need, and I think will pass a law that says that the vice president's role, it clarifies, I think, what we all know, and you can put this under tradition, but I think it's law, and it certainly needs to be explicit law, that the vice president's role is merely ceremonial, that this is a ceremonial process, that once a state counts its ballots, and then each side is free to go to the courts and say, well, these ballots should be counted this way or that, and the courts resolve it. And the state in the court system says, okay, this is who carried that state in the Electoral College. The rest is just ceremonial. Yes, the electors meet in the state capitol. They cast their ballots consistent with whoever won that state. The ballots are then transmitted to the Congress. The clerk has them. The vice president presides over a ceremonial process. The idea that legislatures could say, well, we don't like how the people in our state voted, we're installing these electors, or that a vice president, and Vice President Pence, who had everything to gain, he'd get to be vice president for another 4 years, but had the integrity. And look, I served with Mike Pence in the House for a decade, and I disagree with him on everything, but he did have one good day on January 6th, and that's when he rejected the ridiculous idea that a vice president could say, well, the state has transmitted the fact that all of Pennsylvania's electoral college votes go for Biden, but I don't like that. So I'm going to pull out of my pocket the fact that I had 20 friends in Pennsylvania who all got together in a room, and they said they want to count the ballots for Pennsylvania for Trump Pence, and so we'll just put these forward instead. I think we have to have laws that make that plain. So we don't have time to review each tradition that Trump violated and which ones are more than traditions but are explicit statutes. But I think I've outlined there some of the steps we should take. Now we have the results of our last hearing, that last survey question. Codify Roe v. Wade, support 84%, don't support 8%, unsure 8%. With that, let me take a question submitted in advance by Douglas McLennan of Studio City, who asks, can you provide your constituents with an update on how you're fighting excessive noise pollution from jets departing Burbank Airport? We are being assaulted from the skies! ! I can provide the update. What I can't do is tell you that we've been successful in dealing with the noise problem. And to some extent, to deal with the noise problem, you need to force the FAA to reconfigure all of the airspace above LA County. Because you go and say, well, why does every jet that leaves Burbank have to fly over Studio City? Can't it fly in any one of the other different directions? And the answer is always, well, you've got this in Santa Monica and you've got that in Ontario. And so it's not you can't just pull one string. You have to design a system to minimize the noise and to make sure that if there is going to be noise, it's not all over the southeast San Fernando Valley. We've had a host of forums. What we've seen from the FAA is a refusal to act. Thank God we now have a new FAA director now, or administrator, and it happens to be Phil Washington. And I organized an effort to get Phil Washington confirmed. We in the House don't have a vote on that, but some 19 of us with the Quiet Skies Caucus urged that President Biden and Secretary Buttigieg nominate an FAA administrator who was concerned about noise from aviation. And Phil Washington I worked with when he headed LA Metro. He was a ground transportation person who had previously had some air transportation, and he left LA, went to Denver, and picked up more air transportation, and now he is our FAA. And before I took those steps, I talked to Phil, and I at least have a pledge that he is going to take the health and safety of people on the ground into greater consideration than it has been. And when I say Quiet Skies Caucus, that's a group that we have here in Washington, and we use the term Quiet Skies. I realize that in LA, the LA area, there are a number of different groups concerned with airport noise. Each person or each group has their own view, and the Quiet Skies Caucus here in Washington is not particularly associated with the Quiet Skies group in the San Fernando Valley. I mean, we're all trying to achieve the same thing, which is quiet skies, but we're not taking sides as between different groups in LA County. In last September, we introduced the Restore Everyone Sleep Together Act, the REST Act, to say that Burbank and Van Nuys and other airports can adopt a curfew. I think that's critical, and enforce it. We have introduced the Quiet Communities Act to establish an Office of Noise Abatement in the Environmental Protection Agency, because right now the only agency focused on airport noise is the FAA, and the FAA is a captured agency. The airlines have captured it and controlled it really since the very beginning. We got a report from the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, that says what we already know, and that is that the FAA's system for measuring noise in the San Fernando Valley is completely wrong, because you can't just look at how high does the noise get, but you also have to look at how sustained the noise is. So is, can you hear yourself think in Studio City? Often not. Am I fighting on this? Yes. We have some support in Congress, but the airlines are powerful players with a lot of control in Congress and even more control with the FAA. And I'm not going to rest on this until you can get rest, even in Studio City or in Sherman Oaks where I live. Don, let's take a question from the floor. And again, dial star 3 if you want to ask a question.
Okay, Congressman. We have Brad from Winnetka. Brad, you are now live.
Hello, Congressman Sherman.
Hello,
can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. In the IRA, regarding the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, electrical vehicles are defined as a four-wheeled vehicle. And I'm wondering, could you include three-wheel vehicles in the definition of EVs and allow that to qualify for tax credits?
Well, there aren't very many three-wheeled vehicles. Obviously, if we included them, there'd be an incentive to create them. I could imagine that we cover both three and two-wheeled vehicles. Motorcycle doesn't burn a lot of gas, but does create a fair amount of noise, and you can certainly smell them. It would certainly be a step forward to move toward electric two- and three-wheeled vehicles. That's not an area that I personally was involved in drafting, but it's one of the things certainly for us to look at. Let's take another question from the floor.
Okay, sir. We have.
You know what? Let's do a survey question first, since we'll want to be able to report the answers if we can. This is our final survey question. Do you support the 15% minimum corporate tax, and that it's based on it's based on the income that corporations of over $1 billion report to their shareholders? Do you support the 15% minimum corporate tax? Push 1 if yes, push 2 no, push 3 if unsure. Let's take a question from the floor.
Okay, Congressman Brian from Woodland Hills. Brian, you are on.
Hi, good evening, Congressman.
Good evening.
I wanted to ask a general, a broad question about your feelings on the reform of the Supreme Court.
There are two issues on the Supreme Court that are being considered. One is to apply the judicial standard of ethics to the Supreme Court. I certainly support that. I'm angered by the way that the Obama administration was prevented from appointing a justice in its final year. And I could see expanding the Supreme Court to ameliorate that, and that would require that we add 2 more justices. It is purely a matter of statute how many justices we have, and we have had different numbers over the first century of our union. It's only in more recent times that we've settled on 9. I do worry that sets a precedent that whoever is in or out, gets into power, says, "Oh, let's have 15, let's have 30," and pretty soon you need a basketball arena to house the Supreme Court. So I'm a bit wary of that, but I don't think that the current Supreme Court reflects the voting of the American people. It's supposed to reflect decisions made by presidents and confirmed by the Senate, and the Senate isn't supposed to just block everyone. So I don't, as a practical matter, think that we can get an enlargement of the Supreme Court through the Senate I'd be reluctant to go willy-nilly, but I do think that what happened in the final year of the Obama administration was a travesty, and I'd be willing to vote to reverse that effect. And you'd need to add two: one to vote against Neil Gorsuch, and or one is to have a different philosophy than Neil Gorsuch, and that would often cancel out his vote, and then another one to be the Merrick Garland that I think should have been confirmed. But as a practical matter, I can't imagine that that we really have a chance to put that into law. And obviously, the Dobbs decision on abortion was tragic, but the better way to deal with that is to codify Roe v. Wade as a national statute. We have the results of the last question. Do you support a 15% minimum tax? Yes, 80%. No, 9%. Unsure, 11%. I think we have time for one more question from the floor. Don, who do we have?
Okay, Congressman, we have Gail from Woodland Hills. Gail, you are on now.
Congressman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to know why we're pushing in the state of California for 2035 for electric vehicles when we're going through blackouts and brownouts and having to deter our, keep our lights off. I mean, I'm sitting in the dark right now. The only thing that's lit is my phone. And how can we do that and demand that we have all electric cars? I don't understand. Can you explain it to me? Are we doing more nuclear power plants? How are we going to generate more electricity?
Well, we're going to, first of all, just saying you can't sell, you have to sell an electric car in 2035 doesn't mean every car is electric by 2035. It'll be a natural phase out over the 10 years following that as people turn in their cars. We need in the hours from 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. through 6 a.m. we have an awful lot more available electricity than we do at other times during the days because all the lights are off and most of the televisions are off, and of course all the office buildings are shut down and all the factories are shut down. So I do think that we'll be able to generate adequate electricity as these cars become efficient and as timers on them can cause them to be charged between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. That being said, if this is going to work, we're going to have to expand our capacity to generate electricity with more solar and more wind power and while we don't want to see fossil fuels being burned, you've got to have the capacity to burn fossil fuels when you need to in order to deal with peak demand or days on which the wind power is unavailable. There are, Diablo Canyon is going to be kept open for a while, and in the heat we've experienced in the valley this week. We see that stopping global warming is an important goal. It has to be reached in a way that's fair. The studies I've seen indicate that even if you had to burn natural gas in order to power an electric vehicle, per mile that would generate an awful lot less carbon than if instead you had a gasoline engine. So even if we're talking about generating electricity the way we do now, we still move closer to achieving our goals. It's a bold step. I'm certainly concerned about the price of these vehicles, and of course, the price of gasoline drives me in the other direction. Per mile, you're paying an awful lot less in California for fuel if your fuel is electricity. But we can't all afford Teslas at today's Tesla prices, and the the Inflation Reduction Act provides incentives that I think will allow some people to buy electric vehicles. But what we really have to do is push this industry to the point where everyone can afford an electric vehicle. And we saw that, 100 years ago when cars were, automobiles were the playthings of the rich. And as they got more popular, the technology was better developed and the prices came way down. So I expect that will happen because even with the tax credits, as today's prices, most people can't afford an electric car. Okay, I think that's the last question that we'll be able to handle. And I'm going to ask people to stay on the line for a second. You can go to bradsherman.house.gov to learn about our next town hall, which will be the week before Thanksgiving. And you can submit a question in advance and RSVP. As soon as I say goodbye, you're going to be connected to our voicemail system. I'm going to ask you to do two things. First, give me your email address, believe it or not, even if I already have it, because that allows me to keep you informed under house rules that say that I can't send emails sometimes to people unless I got the email from them. And second, you can leave a message either if you have a constituent service issue or if you want to express your opinion. I won't listen tonight. I will listen tomorrow. So if you didn't get a chance to express your opinion during the town hall, I can certainly hear that opinion tomorrow. I want to thank Senator Bob Hertzberg and Councilwoman Nithya Raman for joining us. I want to thank everyone for being involved, and I look forward to seeing you in the San Fernando Valley. This is Congressman Brad Sherman.